Hello. Today we'll start a new chapter, that is the first chapter from political science, power sharing. Now, as the name of the chapter suggests, how you share power, आप कैसे पावर को बांटते हो, ठीक है, उसका डिवीजन करते हो. आपने एक बहुत अच्छी सेइंग सुनी होगी, प्यार बांटने से बढ़ता है, ठीक है. तो उसी तरह ताकत भी बांटने से कम नहीं होती बल्कि बढ़ती है. बट इन एंशिएंट टाइम्स द किंग्स, द रूलर्स, दे बिलीव दैट इफ द पावर इज केप्ट ओनली इन वन हैंड्स और सिंगल हैंड्स, it could be administered properly in a proper manner. But later on, as societies evolved over the time period, new ideas came into being, people realized that it is better to divide and share power amongst different organizations or groups. In this chapter, power sharing, will look at how power is shared with two examples of basically two different countries. First is Belgium and the second one is Sri Lanka. Now, Belgium is a country in Europe. As you might remember that during the July Revolution in France during the 1830s, Belgium became an independent nation. Fine. Now we'll look at the ethnic composition in both of these countries. First here, basically the majority speaking people are from the Dutch community. That is 59%. Then the second dominating language group is basically French speaking people. They constitute almost 40%. And then there are German speaking population, that is 1%. Whereas in Sri Lanka, if we see, Sinhala people are 74%. Then there are Tamils. They are 18%. Now these Tamils are divided into two sections, basically two groups. One is Sri Lankan Tamils and another one is Indian Tamils. So they are roughly 13% and they are 5%. So this was basically the difference based on language. Now Sri Lanka has one more difference based on basically religion. That is, majority of the Sinhala speaking people are Buddhist, whereas Tamils are Hindus as well as Muslims, and there are some Christians as well who are roughly 7%. Fine. So this is the overall ethnic composition in both these countries. Now how basically differences emerged and why we consider Belgium as a positive example of power sharing and Sri Lanka as a negative example towards power sharing. For Belgium, you also refer this as the accommodative approach or accommodation in Belgium. कैसे लीडर्स ने बेल्जियम में ट्राई करा कि लोगों को साथ लेके चले, और वहीं श्रीलंका में वी रिफर टू एज it as majoritarian form of government, where the majority, that is the Sinhala speaking people, try to dominate over the minority group. So first we'll look at Belgium. Now, during the 50s and the 60s, there were very violent clashes in Belgium between the Dutch-speaking community and the French-speaking community. See, there's one more point which we can look here is, in Brussels, this is the condition in the complete country. Whereas in Brussels is the capital of Belgium. The French speaking are in majority. That is, French are 80% and the Dutch are 20%. So the causes of the differences between the two language communities, linguistic groups, was that the French were more richer and powerful than the Dutch people. So even the Dutch people wanted their rights to be ensured to them. So that is why it led to some violent clashes between both the communities, for which the leaders took a very positive approach in resolving these disputes. From 1970 up to 1993, almost 4 times the constitution of Belgium was amended to bring about some changes which will actually resolve the disputes and the differences between the communities and basically slow down whatever the violence it was propagating. So that is why the constitution, the leaders themselves worked towards a positive solution in Belgium. That is why it is known as accommodative approach towards power sharing. Now the constitution was amended thus, in a way where each community had equal opportunities and equal rights. Firstly, from a unitary structure, Belgium became a federal one. In a unitary type of government, all the power is concentrated in the hands of the central government or a single government. Whereas in the federal structure, the central government allows different regions or regional governments or state governments to share some power with it. So that is what is called federal, in which sharing of power is done. So the idea which was worked out was basically the number of Dutch speaking and French speaking ministers would be same. As in, if there are 5 members, if there are supposingly, if there is a 20 member strength in the Belgium parliament, so 10 people will represent the French language community and 10 will represent the Dutch speaking people. So that is how power is shared. अब इस तरह से पावर शेयर करने का सबसे बड़ा बेनिफिट ये हुआ कि कभी भी सपोज ऐसा कोई लॉ पास नहीं हो पाएगा जिससे which could be either dominant on the French or on the Dutch speaking community, because they both are in equal numbers. Now according to this, what was done in basically country, the French people who were majority in Brussels agreed upon a similar power sharing structure in Brussels as well. So even in Brussels this was agreed upon that the number of Dutch speaking and French speaking ministers will be the same. One more idea which was added was basically the community government. Now the idea of community government was to give all the three language speaking communities, that is the French, the Dutch, as well as the 1% Germans who were part of the Belgian country, to have their say in terms of their own linguistic rights, as in for education, right? So this community government was also created so that linguistic groups like the French, the German and the Dutch will not have further problems amongst themselves. So this was in a way what we saw, that Belgium gave an example of a positive approach towards power sharing, that how power sharing is done keeping in mind the different groups, their different needs, their different cultures, their different languages, and walking a middle path so that each and every group enjoys some kinds of rights as well as freedom, and no community is dominating on the other community. Now coming to the example of Sri Lanka. Now as we saw in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala speaking people were constituting a majority, that is 74% of the population was Sinhala speaking. Now Sri Lanka got independence in 1948. Later on, there was a formation of a majority government. Basically majority government led by the Sinhala speaking people, because that was the only dominant group there, and they introduced their majoritarian policies. In 1956, they also came up with a few laws which ensured that the dominance of the Sinhala speaking community is maintained over the Tamil speaking community. How? Firstly, they made Sinhala as the official state language. Sinhalese, sorry, as the official state language. Thus undermining the language spoken by the Tamils. Okay. In India, which is the official state language of India, or which is the national language of India? Any answer? No. India doesn't have any official state language. The center promotes Hindi, but it doesn't give Hindi the recognition of being the national language of India, right? Because each and every state has their own different languages, and this we'll study in our next chapter, that is federalism. Okay, one more thing which they did was that Sinhala speaking people were given concessions in university jobs, in the post of lecturerships and other government facilities as well as jobs. So basically the Sinhala people were enjoying a lot more rights than their counterparts, the Tamil population. One more law which came up was basically Buddhism was made the state religion. This was another step which led basically to the alienation of the alienation of the Tamil speaking community. Because see, Sinhala people, they were in majority, and they could being in majority they could come up with any law and get it passed in the parliament. So that is why first they came up with the official state language. Then most of the Sinhala speaking people were given concessions in jobs, in universities and other government places. Also Buddhism, which was the official religion, or basically which was the religion of the major Sinhala speaking people, was made as the official state religion. Which religion is the state religion of India? Again, India does not have any official state religion, because India is a secular state, and by secular means that each and every religion is given equal importance, and that no religion is above the law of the country. Like in Pakistan you have Islam as the official state religion, then in Nepal you have Hinduism as the official state religion, then in UK you have Christianity as the official state religion. Similarly in Sri Lanka, Buddhism was made the official state religion. So now these practices, basically what you call as majoritarian policies adopted by the Sinhala speaking people or Sinhala dominant government, led to the alienation of the Tamil community. See, what happens is, if every time if you start feeling that you are the only person who has to take the blame, or you are the only person who has to take the suffering every time, you start feeling that you are not part of the nation. Why? Because if you remember, there's a line in our economics first chapter, that the tribals, they say that why every time a dam is built, we are the people who are being displaced, right? For any development of the country, we are the person who suffers. So is the development of the country at our stake, right? So similarly, the Tamils, they started feeling alienated in Sri Lanka, basically, because the majority population of Sri Lanka, that is the Sinhala speaking people, what they were doing, they were coming up with laws which were taking away the basic rights of Tamil people. So once you start feeling alienated, what you will do, or what can you do? Probably you will launch a protest, you will come up with a political party, right? So that is what even the Tamil population did. They came up with protest, then peaceful marches, they even formed political parties, so that they could enter the government and try to bring some changes or reforms. But each and every effort was undermined because of the dominant Sinhala population. So they could not do much to change the existing situation in the country. So now the only means left with them was to use violence. So therefore, this famous group, the terrorist outfit, which was formed, that is Liberation of Tamil Tigers for Elam. Elam is state. So its leader was Mr. Prabhakaran, and he was basically later on killed, and now the LTTE group as such is no more in function, and things are restoring again back to normalcy in Sri Lanka. But this whole situation, which was created because of the majoritarian policies of the Sinhala people, made the Tamil population feel alienated from the country, and that is why they wanted a separate nation of Tamils for themselves, for which basically they started protests, peaceful marches through political parties, but nothing successful could be achieved. So at the end, basically they formed an armed, basically militant outfit known as LTTE, which led this struggle, and Sri Lanka was dragged into a civil war. Which led to the devastation and destruction of the country's economy. See, if any country is at war, obviously all the resources are diverted towards that war, and a civil war led to the division of the country, right, in two groups. Basically, one is fighting against the LTTE, and the LTTE which is fighting against the government of Sinhala. So the common people, they suffered in this onslaught which carried on for more than 1 or 2 decades in Sri Lanka. So this is how we see that how Belgium and Sri Lanka decided to share power among the different linguistic as well as religious groups. In the case of Belgium, there was only differences which were related to the linguistic or the language speaking. In Sri Lanka, the differences were linguistic as well as based on religion. In Belgium, the leaders had a positive approach, that is, they discussed, debated, amended the constitution to arrive at a proper solution so that people could be given certain basic rights. But in Sri Lanka, this thing was undermined. The Sinhala dominant majority kept on undermining the rights, basic rights of the Tamil minority people, and that is why it led or it dragged Sri Lanka into a civil war. So that is why we consider the Belgian example as the positive example and the Sri Lankan example as the negative example. So this was basically about how power, an example basically of how power was shared in these two countries and what was its outcome or effect. Now we look at why power sharing is necessary, or why is power shared. There are two reasons. First is prudential reasons, and the second one is moral reasons. Based on prudential reasons are based on calculations. ठीक है, इसको हम बोलते हैं नफा नुकसान, गुड और बैड, right? So on the basis of prudential reasons, where you calculate, it is always advised that power should be shared. Why? Because see, we saw it in the example of Sri Lanka. अगर यहाँ पे पावर शेयर होती तो क्या होता? ठीक है, कंट्री सिविल वॉर में नहीं जाता, तो कंट्री की इकोनॉमी पे फर्क नहीं पड़ता, तो बेसिकली अल्टीमेटली नुकसान हुआ ना कंट्री का. तो प्रूडेंशियल रीजन सजेस्ट करते हैं बेस्ड ऑन कैलकुलेशंस कि पावर शेयरिंग शुड बी डन. ठीक है, नहीं तो कैसा होगा? हमारे सामने श्रीलंका वाला एग्जांपल है. ठीक है, द नेक्स्ट रीजंस आर बेसिकली मॉरल रीजंस आर बेस्ड ऑन योर एथिक्स. ठीक है, आपने कभी शायद छोटी क्लासेस में मॉरल साइंस ऐसा सब्जेक्ट पढ़ा होगा. ठीक है, वैल्यूज. तो मॉरली ऑल्सो इट इज advisable that power should be shared. Why? Because in a democracy, see, when power is distributed among people, each and every person has or will have the ability to do their best, right? अब अगर पावर आप एक ही जगह एक ही हाथ में रखोगे और उससे बेसिकली क्या होगा, यू डिनाई पावर टू अदर पीपल, राइट, विच माइट बी लोअर टू यू. What are you doing? Morally you are not correct. So that is why they say moral reasons, according to moral reasons also, that power should be shared. So these are basically two reasons why power sharing is done. Or why is it basically necessary to share power? Now we will come at the last part of the chapter, that is various forms of power sharing. How power is shared, or what are the different forms in which power is shared in different countries. The first one is basically your horizontal type of power sharing. Now what is horizontal? This is basically a vertical line and this is horizontal, right? So now here these are different organs of the government. If you know, legislature, executive and judiciary. So this is called basically as horizontal form of power sharing, where each organ keeps a check on the other so that no one becomes too powerful. So that is why this system is also called system of checks and balances. Basically they check each other as well as they balance each other out. That is your horizontal form of power sharing. Now another aspect, the second one, is the vertical form of power sharing. That is your central government, also known as union government. Then your regional governments, also known as state governments. And lastly, panchayats. In India, what we refer as the panchayat or the panchayati raj system, or the urban and the rural local self-government. So these are basically the vertical forms of power sharing, where the center is at the top and it is distributing or dividing power with the, or sharing power rather, with the different regions or different states, like how in India it is done. And this system of power sharing, that is the vertical system of power sharing, we'll be studying in detail in the next chapter, that is federalism. So these are two major forms of how power is shared. Now again, power is also shared in other ways as such, through your political parties, then through your different religious groups, then through trade unions, then through student unions and such things. So power sharing is done in all these different types of ways. Thank you.